Mugen Gumi e yokoso. Welcome to Mugen Gumi. I'm Masakame, and this continues our ongoing sessions on the basics of Shogi. The last two sessions were spent on the Bogin opening. The first session on getting the opening going, and up to the point that Black got frustrated by the fact that White was able to successfully counter the opening. The second session continued with going on to a defensive posture on Black's part and awaiting the opening to continue the attack, which did eventually materialize. And when we left the session, Black was at a significant advantage positionally, and probably would be able to win the game in 7, 8, or maybe 9 moves, assuming that everything that had been working for Black up to that point continued to work. This time, we're going to introduce the Yagura opening, which is very intentionally going over to the defense. And just to as a demonstration, I'll have White do the Bogin opening to counter it, and that'll be good up to a point, and then White will go over to a defensive posture as well, and that'll be pretty much where we leave it. I think there'll be enough time for that. Okay, and we're already set up. Black on this side, White on this side, as usual, and no time like the present. So this opening starts on this side. Note that that exposes the bishop, or the kaku's diagonal. All right. White's going to open with Bogin, so that means opening with the rook or hisha pawn, or fu. All right. Then we move Gin to a position in front of Kin. That's a fairly common opening, or a common component of an opening. Okay, that pushes on. Wow. Okay. All right. And then this is where we're confronted with something a little different, because ordinarily for Bogin, this would be the next move. That presents a bit of a problem, because that would result in a free pawn, because you're not going to do this, because that will happen. So that pretty much frustrates Bogin very early. So putting everything back. So that's where that stands now. Okay, so White's not going to do that. White's going to make a very conventional move preparatory to building his defense. Okay, we'll make that move. So we're not totally defensive. Okay, and then White's going to start the Bogin process here of getting silver to climb the pole here. Okay, and then Black's going to move Kin to this position next to Kaku. So that concentrates quite a bit of power in this particular corner of the board. And continuing to climb the pole. Okay. I'm going to move silver over here. that's probably as far as white wants to push his luck here. Coming up here is already unacceptable. Committing in this direction leaves only one avenue of retreat, so that's a bit that represents a bit of a problem. So that might be as far as we want Game to climb the pole here. Okay, and just to show that we're not totally defensive, black advances the pawn up to this point. So that's that's in common with some of the opening parts of the Bogeen opening as well. Okay, and white's gonna wait and see what happens, and that also establishes some of his defense as well. In fact, given the ability to continue to push the offense here, it's a good idea, as we saw in the last two sessions, to go on the defensive and wait for your opportunity. Okay, push the center pawn. Put silver up. And coincidentally, white does exactly the same thing. Keen, center of the board, second rank relative. Okay, advance another pawn, since it's well covered there. Corresponding pawn. That there. So Keen goes up to the third rank from the player. Okay, advance that pawn, and then this is going to be interesting. We pull the bishop or kaku back here. Note that from here he's got an open diagonal. We'll advance the knight to the only square to which he can move. And then we move Kaku up here, where it can be a little more useful. Now he's covering silver here and can still has access to a good open diagonal. Advance the center pawn. But what it also does is allows this. And then white moves into a further defensive position. Now he's well entrenched here as well. Then black's move is here, moving Osama further into his own entrenchments. And then that's pretty much where we're going to leave this, because white's next move is kind of interesting because he's thwarted over here. You know, the mass of the defense here is significant, and so continuing the attack here is probably not a good idea. It'll be expensive and messy. So white's next move is indeed very interesting from this point, because white can pretty much assume that black's next move will be here. So at this point, black is very well entrenched once that move becomes available to him. Again, white has not made the counter move to black taking this position where the silver on the left side normally is. So again, white's next move is interesting. It probably is not going to change the fact that black's going to go here anyway, and at this point, as solidly entrenched as he is, the Yagura opening is really the come dig me out opening. Because it will take some time to penetrate all of the defenses here. Bearing in mind that there's still a fair amount of power still available to Black to launch his own attack, if that's the plan. The plan also could be to persist in the defense until such time that White has managed to get exhausted, and then Black can go in for the win. So it depends on your overall strategy in terms of how you're going to approach the game. Certainly going over to defensive early on in the game and then being free to act more or less has a lot of advantages, especially for a beginning player, because at least you've taken care of business at home. So that's the Yagura opening. Now, to be honest, for Black to go immediately over to the defense like this, given that Black's normally the aggressor, going first in the game, as is the case, setting that aside, it is a little bizarre for Black to go over to the defensive immediately like this. But it's just a demonstration of that particular opening, and the use of the Bogin against it to the point to which it was taken is a little bit contrived, but not too terribly unreasonable, because we did stop the silver behind the pawn as we did. So it's not totally unreasonable. And White going over defense once the initial attack got stalled is perfectly reasonable to go over to the defense. Again, until you find such conditions that going over to the offense is feasible again, which is pretty much the point of the defense. So for the next session, we're going to move from static Rook openings, which is what both of these were. In Bogin, the Rook did move, but only in the one file in which the Rook was initially positioned. So, up and down the same file is not lateral movement, which is kind of what defines what a mobile Rook or Hisha opening is like. So in that case, again, it moved in its one file forward once, back once, and stayed put for the rest of the game. In the Yagura opening, neither Rook moved at all, and so by definition, very static. The next session will introduce a mobile Rook opening, and so the Rook will move from that one file somewhere else. And it's a more advanced approach to the game, and it's a little more difficult to defend against. So that's why I did wait at least a few sessions before going into that. Well, if you like what I'm doing here, please do hit the thumbs up button at the bottom there. And if you're interested in continuing to see how this unfolds, by all means hit the subscribe button. Till then, stay safe. Ja mata ne.